Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of more representation, checking out a death metal group from Brazil with former members of the band Nervosa. We're of course talking about Crypta, and the song that we're looking at today is The Outsider, which comes from their 2023 Shades of Sorrow album. So let's dive in and see what Crypta is bringing to the table today. Yeah, so shifting from the syncopation to this 4 on the floor, just laying down every beat. Really interesting movement between the two guitars, bass, and the drum. This neat shifting rhythmic focus. Really strong, great bass presence as well. Ooh, interesting walk down. A little spicy there. See, the guitars are kind of moving in opposing directions. The ride cymbal bell work. There's just a lot of cool details. Okay. Very cool way to bring us back into the chorus. Very expressive solo here. Very fun use of the drums. fun little metric modulation coming into this section. Oh, into the final chorus, I'm going to assume. Yeah, so the bass actually gives us some hits between the beat, and every once in a while it trades off with the ride cymbal to take that role. I think I need to check this album out. I know of Crypta. I heard their first single years ago, but they were a bit heavy for me. This though, this isn't. There's a nice balance, I think. Sure, there are heavy sections in here. The vocals are rather harsh, but there also is a real strong sense of melody, both from the drums and the guitar. There's cool bass lines. The bass has a nice strong presence here right in the middle of the mix. There's a lot of stuff in here that I enjoy, that I don't recall being things that I associated with Crypta's earlier work. How many albums have they put out now? Because, like I said, I know this is 2023. So they have a 2021 album. None of those song titles look familiar. That's it, just the 2 albums. I must have listened to one of them, but it was years ago, so maybe I just forgot about it. But yeah, I enjoyed this track. Let's get into why I enjoyed this track. First of all, right in that first verse, the song kicks off. Tons of energy coming in. We have heavy guitar work, heavy drum work. The bass is just large and punchy. You're in store for a metal track. There's just no way that you can't. But I think what I liked most right at the gate was not the intro, but the opening verse. There was this interesting rising falling pattern in inversion on the 2 guitars. When one rose in pitch, the other lowered in pitch, and they inverted back and forth. After doing this for 3 repetitions, the way that it was punctuated was that the drums would bring in some ride bell stuff, which is actually something we hear a lot in this song, is using the bell of the ride cymbal, which is, so the cymbal's rather flat, kind of angles up a little bit, but at the very top there's a rounded part. That's called the bell, and it has a very specific tone to it, usually a bit sharper than the rest of the cymbal. And it's utilized quite a bit in this track. And I think it works because it's typically used in places for melodic writing. Not necessarily in a way that I think you would typically hear with a prog drummer, but something a bit more than just being the backbeat, being the metronome of the group, and kind of pushing away from standard drum fills as well. Because, in death metal, you will hear a lot of starting on the snare, hitting it 4 times, moving up to the high tom 4 times, mid tom 4 times, floor tom 4 times. You get digga-digga-digga-digga-digga-digga-digga. And it's just, you hear that all the time. That is a very standard drum fill. Some people can toss some stuff in there, spice it up a little bit, but here, they never really felt like traditional drum fills designed to fill space. They always felt like they were carrying on what the guitars were doing by utilizing so many various parts of the drum kit in ways where we never really repeated anything more than once. You hit the snare's off limits. We got to hit something else. And so we have the variety of sounds, but also they aren't usually strictly focused on rhythm either. Whereas I just talked about that very stereotypical walk down of the drums. You got 4/16 notes usually on each drum, so you have a consistent 16th note attack going on. But this drummer changes it up. There's some syncopation in here. So not only do we have a variety of sounds, we have a variety of note lengths. And that's really what makes drumming feel melodic to me, is a variety of ideas that don't fit within pockets of rhythms or pockets of sounds. And we get quite a few of that in here, and we hear it right at the start in the verse. We have this wild rising and falling idea in the guitars, and then the drums come in at the end of that in the fourth bar of the phrase, and they add a melodic quality to it as well. The bass has this cool rising and falling as well, but it feels more like a walking bass line, a bit slower than the other two guitars in order to hold down the harmonic functionality of the section. It all just works so well, and it sounds wild to my ears, but it's not just this contrast either of 3 bars of one thing and then the punctuating bar at the end to loop it back. We also have this concept where that is a 4-bar phrase, and then there is a different 4-bar phrase that comes after it. And so we alternate between these two riffs, these two ideas. And that creates momentum and movement. We have a cycle, a smaller cycle within the larger cycle. Really great idea right there. Keeps the song moving forward, but it never really loses intensity. And this is just a personal thing. This isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but one of the things I dislike in more typical death metal is the riff. And you just play the riff. Sometimes that riff is a 4-bar phrase and the punctuating idea takes you back to the beginning. Sometimes it's just a 1-bar idea and you just repeat that over and over and over. I find that traditional death metal can be a bit lacking in compositional contrast for me, which is kind of a big thing in death metal entirely. I don't really want to get too far off track, but as far as volume and intensity goes, death metal is usually 10 all the time. Crypta's no different here. And so without volume or layering dynamics, I kind of look for that contrast, that dynamic writing in the riffs itself, in the melodies. And death metal doesn't always deliver on that either, which is fine. But when it does deliver on that, that's when you're going to hook me as a listener, and Crypta does that very well. There's always something new going on, something fresh with the group, with the musicality of it all. Then we get to the chorus, though. The bass starts to shine here, really punching through the mix. We have the guitars doing their stuff, just some really cool riffage going on, and drums holding things down in the back. What stands out to me on the chorus is a bit of contrast we didn't really hear too much of in the verse. The vocals. I'm just going to kind of talk about the vocals in general here, but the chorus is really where this started to stand out to me. The verse tends to be a bit static. The vocalist has one delivery type and sticks with it, but the chorus we actually hear 3 or 4 perceived pitches, being that they're false chord screams, I think. I don't know. I'm not a vocal coach. I'm still trying to pick up vocal terminology and hearing that. But I think these are false chord screams. They're definitely not growls. Oh, wait, no. Given the frequency, these are fries, aren't they? See, I don't really know. If anyone's aware of this, let me know what's going on with the vocals here. But they're certainly not growls, and growls are false chord. That's where you get the really low guttural stuff, right? And the higher range stuff tends to be fries, I think. So we have a lower fry and a higher fry, and then we also have some range in between, which I believe is manipulated by mouth shape, where bigger mouth sounds will have a higher perceived pitch, and if you tighten it down, kind of make like an ooh, kind of get, well, actually even that right there, ow, even in using our usual vocal cords, that kind of effect happens as well. But we have this movement of sound, a slurring of the pitch, so to speak. Again, it's compression. There is no note being sung, but there's a perception of higher and lower tones in there. And we do get a variety of them. And I am a huge fan of this. I've mentioned this in the past, contrast, dynamics, it's all kind of looping together here. But I don't like monotone vocals, whether they're clean or harsh. Harsh vocals just tend to lean into monotonous sounds more often. And I really appreciate the variety of sounds that the vocalist utilizes here. Granted, they're all the same technique, I believe, but again, the perceived pitch changes. It makes it so that the vocals aren't just texture-based and rhythmic-based. There is some kind of pitch component to it that allows it to be kind of melodic. I wouldn't really say that any of the vocal lines are a melody, but they are melodic, and just having those changes creates pitch contrast in the vocals, and it just draws me in instantly. I heard that. We went from the lower one. She says, I am the outsider, and then says some other stuff, and then she goes, I am the outsider, but it's higher. I'm like, yes, okay, I'm on board for this. Right? This was really good. I enjoyed that. What I found interesting was that after this chorus, we went to a post-chorus. There wasn't really anything of interest here. It almost feels like a reset of ideas. We kind of go towards a 4 on the floor idea with the drums. We get away from the cool cymbal work. We kind of simplify things. The guitars shift to a very straightforward riff. I don't think it was a heavy use of pedal tone, but I can't remember. It was way more simplified than either the verse or the chorus riff. And it almost feels like a moment of reset, of bringing all this intensity back down so that we can get back into it and create. We had peaks, right? The verse was pretty wild. The chorus had some cool stuff. Now we need some valleys so that the peaks have their impact again. Contrast, dynamics. Say it with me, fans. Everything is so good. But here's the other thing that happened too. We went to a guitar solo. Now this I was quite interested about. It came into the song quite a bit earlier than I expected. I think we weren't even halfway into the track when the first solo kicked in. And I looked at the time and I was like, whoa. How long are we going to be in this bridge? There's a lot of music left. But quickly, I didn't care because it was such a great solo. It had a little bit of shred there towards the end, but it built into that. And the first half of it was very delightful to my ears. I love the melody writing here. It's a very tasteful solo without ever becoming too soft or too slow or lacking impact. It is still, at the end of the day, a death metal solo. It has that bite. It has that grit in tone, in note choice, in movement. But there's also something a bit softer to it. It's not so heavy-handed. Even the shred that we had towards the end of the solo felt a bit more dexterous than the blistering, face-melting stuff we've heard in other death metal bands. It just appeals to me, and I wish I knew why. What is it about the faster playing here that speaks to me? Is it just the composition? I don't know. The note relationships don't sound too different than most other death metal bands. It didn't really get too spicy. We had that very interesting descending thirds at the end of the first solo that went outside the chord progression a little bit, the key, and brought in some interesting notes. But it got a little spicy, but unusual? Experimental? Not really. I might have to give it another listen. Oh, I said I might listen to the whole album, so I'll definitely check out Outsider again, but really focus in on what the guitar is doing there. Maybe I can find sheet music. I hate saying maybe. I wish metal sheet music were documented better and musicians put it out for people to read and enjoy and learn from. Honestly, that's the main reason I want to have it. I know some bands put out books, like physical books, sometimes PDFs too, but they get pricey, and I don't have a problem with that. Bands, they need to eat, they need to pay their bills and stuff. But I can't I can't buy every single band's uh, sheet music for every single album just because I want to figure something out that I missed during a reaction. That could get real expensive real fast. But yeah, there's just something about that solo that I enjoyed. Then we come back though into another verse, into another chorus, into another post-chorus, into another solo. I found this to be very interesting. The structure gets very unique here. As far as I can tell, we had intro, verse, chorus, post-chorus. I think we did a second verse, I can't remember, but we went into a bridge, and then we went to verse, chorus, post-chorus, another bridge, into the final chorus. Very big loops here, and if we're going to talk about cycles within cycles, having the verse be a little cycle, but there actually being two pieces to the verse, being a larger cycle, we can also look at the jumping between verse, chorus, post-chorus as another cycle, and then that group being cycled within itself, having the verse, chorus, post-chorus, bridge as a larger idea that we revisit again. It is very cool to see how all of these loops become recursive, bending in upon themselves. And no matter what level you're at, there is this element of cyclicality to it. But being that these sections can feel as long as they are, there is also a linearness to the entire track. For that right there was a couple parts in the song where I was like, okay, where are we going next? Once I kind of caught on in the middle of the track that we were revisiting the earlier loop, and after the second bridge, I kind of, I was like, oh, where are we going? And then we come back to that final chorus. I called that once I heard it. But, yeah, there were a couple of moments where I wasn't quite sure where they were going to take it next. In retrospect, it makes total sense. It's just two large loops, but in the moment, it really feels like they could go anywhere, and it feels like they're constantly moving in a forward direction, never looping back in upon themselves. And that linear cyclicality is something that I love in music. I talked about the guitars, talked about all the sections. One last thing, I think, on the drums. There's some really cool drum fills in here, and I do think it's awesome there as well. We got to hear two solos from one of the guitars, one solo from the other guitar. I don't think the bass ever really got any spotlight in here. Then we got two drum solos. The whole band quit out and the drums took the focus, and I love those as well for the same reason that I talked about enjoying the drum fills earlier in the in this analysis. There is something vaguely melodic about the way that this person drums, but not in a way that completely loses the rhythmic aspects. There are drummers who feel like they're playing completely linear ideas. There's no beat, there's no pattern, there's no rhythm to it all. Drummers like Danny Carey, is that who it is from Tool? Really great at sitting in the pocket and leaning into the beat and being that metronome behind the song, but also really great at just writing these linear melodic ideas of letting the drums be a melody instrument alongside the guitars or the vocals of Tool. This kind of sits in the middle there. There is still an element of timekeeping going on in these fills, but there's also an element of wanting to utilize the whole kit, of not wanting to stick on anything too long and wanting to create levels of syncopation, varying lengths of notes where there isn't rigidity, like 4 on the floor. That's just quarter notes, constant quarter notes. There's rigidity to that, but if you have a quarter note and then an eighth note and then 2 16th notes and then an eighth note again and then a 16th and a quarter, you're creating something that kind of moves away from a rigid groove into something that to me feels a bit more melodic, especially if you're changing pitches or timbre with every hit as well. And that's what I hear out of this. There is still an alignment to a type of rhythmic backbone. I don't think there's any point where the drums take over a solo and then we completely lose all element of groove. But there's also this idea of, oh, it's my turn to solo. I'm going to write something worth listening to, not just impressive, but also something that complements the melody writing that we hear from the guitars. And I love that. Every bit of this band is well versed at what they're doing. They have a unique voice when they come together in the death metal realm, if this song is anything to base the rest of their discography on. Again, this is all very surprising to me. The first couple of songs I heard from Crypta were neat, but definitely not my cup of tea. And I don't know if it's just that I've grown more accustomed to death metal in the past 3 years, or if they're just writing music that appeals to me more, but I enjoyed this track a lot more than anything else I've heard from them. And like I said, I'm going to have to check out more. I'm going to look at some lyrics right here, and then we're going to wrap this video up. Alright, these lyrics are very straightforward. Interestingly, they dance between two sides of the same coin. The song is called The Outsider. It's about somebody who is on the outside of society. They feel different than the people that they see around them. The chorus is interesting. We actually have two different choruses here. Also, another thing, if we look at just the vocal lines, we have verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. That's the very typical ABABCB pattern. So it's very cool that poetically this is very standard as far as structure goes, but musically, because of the instrumental interludes, the solos, the intro, that we actually have something a bit more complex. I thought that was pretty neat. Anyways, the chorus says, I am the outsider. The first chorus says, I'm a bleeding heart in a numb world, a bare soul in an invulnerable crowd, and a blaze in a soil grown cold. The second chorus says, a bloom in a ground made of stone, an embrace in a deceitful world, deep waters in a shallow pond. I really like this, especially starting out, the very first one being a bleeding heart in a numb world. It's not just that I feel different from the environment around me, it's that I feel the environment around me just isn't as bright as I want it to be. Eventually, even saying that she feels like a bloom in a stone ground, beauty within a barren element. I really like that. Deep waters in a shallow pond. Everything around me shallow, but I hold multitudes. This whole perspective here that the earth, my environment has gone gray and emotionless, but I still burn vibrantly, is a beautiful metaphor for this entire track. But it's also not very death metal. Not traditionally, anyways. A lot of We're the Outsiders, when I think of death metal music, is a bit more isolationist, and also a bit more I am so much better than you kind of vibe. Maybe I'm just thinking of 90s death metal specifically, which was a different time, I suppose, but I just don't expect this type of vulnerability from death metal in general. And sort of this, it's not really optimism, is it, even? But I feel like anytime that we have an outsider track in death metal, it's about cynicism. You all are sheep, I see the world the way that it should be, I'm an outsider. That's sort of the message I associate with death metal when they have a thematic parallel to this. But I just love this. I'm vulnerable, I'm a bleeding heart, I'm a flower that blooms. It's just a very different take on being the outsider, but it is death metal, so we do need some more aggressive, in-your-face lyrics, and this is where the verses and bridge come in. This creates, I think, an interesting contrast to those. The first verse says that this is a sickening society where my purpose won't belong, fabricated ideals crumbling in a spiral of doom. The second verse speaks to a type of self-loathing. It says, "Sharp stings of rejection cut through my skin, solitude hollering, unworthy, unworthy, telling me tales of unlovability." It's not just that this person is more vibrant than their environment, but that is causing them mental anguish as well. It's causing them to change their perception of themselves. They are what I would consider the way that people should be, loving and caring and wanting to grow in a world that doesn't want that, and yet they're finding that their experience being an outsider makes them feel like they're wrong. But it's told through this very aggressive metal vocabulary, and I think that's wonderful. It's a really beautiful way to pair all this together. We then get to the bridge though, and I have a tough time pairing this back. It's certainly about doing things that the people in your environment don't, crafting you as an outsider to the group, but, well, let me read these lines. "I face the demons that you tame, I dance in the shadows that you fear, I bathe in feelings you disguise, I am the imperfections you hide." I like the idea of bathing in feelings that people push away, but the idea of facing demons that other people tame, dancing in the shadows that you fear, these kind of feel like the more traditional, quasi-edgy stuff that I would expect from a death metal song about being outside of a group. And I don't think those two lines really fit as well with the rest of the track lyrically, but, you know, maybe they're not for me. Yeah. Maybe the lyrics are written for the lyricists. This is how they feel about the world. In which case, who am I to tell them that they wrote the wrong lines in their story? But they do, at least to me, feel a bit different than the rest of the track. Regardless, I absolutely love the idea of seeing a world that's gone cold and you still wear your heart on your sleeve and feel different because of it, made to feel wrong, that you shouldn't do this, when honestly having your emotions like this is the human experience, and to deny that is to deny ourselves life. And I love how the song kind of says at the end that I'm not going to fight back. As much as you try to make me feel like I'm wrong, I'm not. I will hold this title proudly. I am the outsider. And that kind of mixes with the music too. There is a harsh abrasiveness to it. It is death metal at the end of the day. But I mentioned a sort of dexterity and melodious quality to the guitar solos that really spoke to me. A sort of bringing something a bit more dexterous to the raw, aggressive brutality of metal, and kind of finding the middle point there. And I think the song does that well musically and lyrically. Alright, those are my thoughts. Crypta's The Outsider. Let me know what you thought of this track, if there's anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, or maybe even correct me on if I was wrong about something. Maybe you picked up on something I didn't even touch on. Let me know all of that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, that wraps it up for this one. We do have a special selection coming up next. It's Iron Butterfly. If you know them, you probably know what the request is. It's going to be a trip. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We're going to check out an entire album. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.